Okay, we're going to make a start now. Thank you very much for joining us for our webinar, A Business Process Integration or Imagination. My name's Peter Tyrrell and I'll be your presenter for today. So what we've got here is a subtext underneath our main heading is you may imagine that you've integrated everything, but maybe that's not quite true. So we're going to examine some of the integration areas that companies have overlooked, and we're also going to talk about some of the challenges of business process integration and how they can be addressed. So about this webinar, we're aiming to complete the presentation of the information in 20 minutes, and we're leaving some time at the end for some question and answer. And the main thrust of this is that we're going to be looking at the challenges of business process integration for organisations. In the most case, we'll be talking about the high-level business drivers for it, the components of business process integration, and in one or two areas we will show some depth of technical information. During the webinar, you will be able to type questions in that you would like answered at the end. That can be done on the right-hand side of your screen. There should be at the bottom of the Go to Webinar panel, there's an area where you can type questions. Thank you. So let's set the stage. Okay, we're going to be talking about integration. Now, your organisation will have some kind of integration already in place, and a lot of this is what we call structured integration. And by structured I mean that we're using some well-known form of application programming interface, or we're using EDI or publicly defined and publicly understood interfaces. And a lot of the times this is done through programming, but what we're talking about in this particular webinar is the unstructured integration, and this is where it may be someone receiving an Excel spreadsheet via an email, it may be someone sending files to another company or even inside of your company. So this leads to a question: is how much effort does it take for your organisation to handle new information, either within your company or with your trading partners, both coming into or leaving your organisation? Does it take days, weeks, even months? And then inevitably something will go wrong, a link may fail, the data isn't correct, and you'll need to recover a business process that's in flight. So how do you do that currently? The business process integration has four major components or areas. You can see them on the screen. They're transportation, transformation, orchestration and administration. So what I'm going to do now in the remainder of this is just to talk about each one of these areas, what its role is in business process integration, and in particular on the transformation area we will drill down a bit, because that's the area where you really need to be able to ensure that the quality of the data that is in this business process is correct for the receiving application. Transportation. At a very high level, it's how is the data moved in your business process. So it might be coming into your organisation, you may be providing it to another organisation, or it can be within your organisation. And you don't need to be a multinational corporation with multiple affiliates. Even between applications within your organisation, there's integration that has to take place. And this can happen, the transport can be many of these techniques that we have listed here. Simple file transfer, it could be someone emails attachments into you, and then someone has to detach those and do something with the contents. It could be a structured EDI transaction where the rules are well defined and they've been in place for many years. There's message queuing. Then if we look at the World Wide Web, there's been several generations of how data can be moved over using the web. There's HTTP, which everyone is familiar with their browser, but that can be used for file transfer. Then the next generation was what's called web services. Now with web services, that's been around for some time, and it used a way of formatting the data called XML. More recently, you may have heard the term RESTful interfaces. Without going into the differences, it is the new way in which web services have evolved, and there's a different way that the data, a different structure that the data is held in, called JSON. And across all of this, we have, if you like, a covering or a layer of security or encryption techniques that may or may not be used. And again, your transportation will have to honour those. Now let's look at the second area, which is transformation. And this is where we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive. Transformation. You can have different types of files. And what I mean by that is it's the way in which the file itself holds information. So it could be comma-separated variable, it could be an Excel spreadsheet, it could be a database file or whatever. And then within the file type, you'll have different data formats. And as a CSV file type, there's also a CSV way that data is held. It's comma-separated variable. You'll just see variables inside the text that are separated by commas. There are also other data formats which we've mentioned. XML has been very popular over the last decade, and more recently JSON is being used. Then the next area that you have to think about in a transformation is that once you've been able to understand the file and understand the format of the data itself may require conversion of some type. And that could be fairly simple. It could be that it's held in American date format and your system requires Australian date format. Very simple kind of conversion like that. Or it could be that it requires some kind of enrichment. In other words, there may be data and it can't be simply converted. It may be the key to some other data, and then that needs to be enriched before it's actually delivered to your system, or before your system delivers it to your trading partner. So let's have a look at transformation in a little bit more detail. Here's an example. We're in the Composer graphical workbench, and this is where you essentially define how data will flow between different formatting. So on the left in our example, we've got a simple comma-separated variable file, and what it is, it's dealer sales information. And in this case, the dealer, the year and the month are staying consistent across many of the rows, and then there'll be further information of make, model, category and volume that will be repeated for each of these variances. So in this case, what we're doing, we just map it simply by dragging dealer over to the field in an XML structure, which is how our internal application wants the data held. In this case, because we know it's in rows, we can say that there's a repeating element here within the XML. So this allows us to define that repeating element, and we just drag the repeating objects like make, model and category over to their output categories. So this is very simple field mapping. One thing I'd like to draw your attention to is that we could also map this further to some other data source or some other application program. As you can see here, there are outgoing connectors as well. And there could be more than one input as well. So this is just a very simple example. The second type of transformation we talked about was conversion. So taking our original example, let's say that the month that was being passed from our dealer was a 2-digit month, And then what we actually required in our system was a 3-character text. So for instance, if it was 04th April, we want APR coming through in our month. What's happened here is that from Composer there's a rich palette of over 60 functions from which you can just drag and then drop it onto here, connect up into and then out of, and the function then does the conversion for you. So let's extend this now and look at enrichment. So as you can see, we're still with the original example, but in this case what we've done is we still have the month mapping here, but what we've also done is we said, well, the dealer is passing through a category, but the category is in no way the same format as how we know a category. So this is a table that we would have created that lists the dealer categories and how they're going to be related to our categories. So we've dropped on another function from Composer's palette. We've linked that as an incoming value. It looks it up in the table and it returns the result. In this case, what we're saying is if it does find it, we want it to actually place the value over here. And in this, we've done nothing. If it doesn't find it on false, we're doing nothing. In a real world business process, we would probably link that to an exceptions file, and then we would alert someone to look at those exceptions and follow them up. All 3 steps that you've seen here have required no programming. You can extend LANSA Composer with programming, but the vast majority of our clients that use Composer do not need programming in order to facilitate their business process integration. The business analysts that understand the business and the nature of the data can quite easily create simple and even complex business process integration flows. Here's a bit of an overview of all of the capabilities within Composer. We can see the types of formats, PDF files can output. We're looking at web services. There's SOAP, which is the kind of earlier web services, and there's the REST and JSON. We can look at different file transfer services, etc. So there's quite a broad range of capabilities that are provided by Composer. So the third aspect of business process integration is orchestration. And what we mean by that is really how do we now control the business process. We've got the capability to handle how the data moves. We've got the capability on what format and how we can convert the data. Now we want to be able to essentially define the steps that we want to go through. And this could be just a simple step-by-step business process where data comes in, maybe it's an attachment on a spreadsheet, and we then want to process that right through so it updates our back-end application. Or it could be more complex. In this case, Composer could actually interrogate the value of the data and conditionally branch to different types of flows, or it could branch and actually run different strands as parallel processing. Part of orchestration is how do we handle errors and can we restart from those? And lastly, the way that we look at this is it's workflow for automated processes. So many of you will be familiar with workflow where people are assigned tasks to do, and when they finish that task it then goes on to the next task in the workflow. Well, we do that for automated processes, no people required. Here's an example of a simple process flow, and I'll just walk through this so it's good to understand. What we're doing here is it's where the dealers are actually emailing us in their sales volumes, and they're attaching the information in a CSV attachment. So in this case, we read the email from the server, and we don't we're just making sure that they may have actually included more than one attachment. So we're actually looping through the email and taking each attachment. For each attachment, we come down and we generate a unique name for the XML file, and then we do the transformation step. When we've done all of the attachments, we will then send a message to the end application to process the XML, and in this case we're sending an MQ series message to a data warehouse to say, please import the data, it's in the correct format, it's in the right place in the system, it's ready for consumption. So as you can see, you have many capabilities here, and we've just got a fraction of them that we're showing over here to be able to build up these process flows. The last area we'll look at is administration. So what we're going to be looking at here is how Composer logs what's happening. If processes can be restarted, how do we restart them? And we need to also understand that you need to be able to, these business process integrations, once they're defined, they're as much a part of your production as your back-end applications. So you need to be able to have security over who can update them, who can create them, and how they operate. So here's an example where we are looking at processing 3 XML files that have come through an email, and so Composer logs at a fine level of detail, and it also, when an error occurs, it doesn't bother opening up areas that have been completed successfully. You can still drill down by pressing on this plus, but it knows that that first loop, that there was nothing wrong with it. It was in the third file that it found a problem. So that's why it's automatically expanded this area to give you a look. You can come down here and it says, what we've found is that someone's typed in the word 5 instead of the letter 5 into one of the numeric fields. Now you can click down there further and get even lower level logging information, but in this example we've got enough information now to know, well, we can correct this pretty easily by editing this and making it the numeral 5. So you have to use a little bit of imagination that we've gone to the incoming file, we've changed the 5 characters into the numeral 5, and then we will have pressed restart in Composer. And Composer knows that it's already done the first 2 successfully, and it's got to do the third loop. So at this point, this is where we were like, the process ended here because there was this error. We've pressed restart here, and it says processing has been restarted. It has now processed that third file on the loop, and it now realizes that all 3 files have been successfully completed, so the processing has now been completed. You can, with Composer, you can also do other things. For instance, if there's an error, Composer can look at the type of error, and in your business process you may say, well, this is fairly critical that someone knows straight away. I want to send an SMS. So if you have an SMS gateway, Composer would be able to construct and send an SMS message to someone. So we're at the point where we have gone through the majority of our presentation. We've talked about what business process integration is composed of, the challenges to it, how they can be addressed. So I just want to inform everyone that we will be sending you a follow-up email to those people that have registered. There will be a link to the recording of this webinar. There will be contact details for each region, and if your colleagues may be of a more technical bent, they might want to drill down on some of the technical information of exactly how Composer does things. We have a lot of technical information that we can provide, and there are longer technical presentations that actually demonstrate how Composer constructs the business process integration flows. So at this point, I'd like to thank you for your attention. We have wanted to keep this to a short webinar, only 20 minutes, but as we've been giving this, I'm just looking at some of the questions that have come through. One of the questions was, how long does it take to learn to use Composer? Our normal approach, where we are talking with an organisation, is to help them pick a proof of concept, and we can come in. It's usually very short, 3 to 5 days, where we actually install and configure Composer for them. We build it alongside of them, so we'll build a business process flow, and quite often by the end of the 3rd day, it's the employees within that organisation that are now starting to run Composer. So we find that very beneficial because they actually learn on-site with their own systems. And what else? I've just seen the next question here. They're saying, what about performance? Is there a compromise? Composer uses various optimized functions that have been purpose-built. So really what we've found is that there's not really much of a performance difference between Composer and using programming techniques. It's the delivery of it and the management of it that we've found most beneficial. And the last question, do we have any references? Yes, some of the links that we'll be sending through will be to case studies that we have, and you can see there various companies in this region and around the world that have used Composer to build real-world business process flows that meet their business needs. So I'm just looking up here. Yeah. Okay, I've got a question here. Ballpark pricing. Okay. Composer is it is not limited by the number of people or number of process flows. It's purely by the size of the server on which it's running. The entry-level price tag is 33,000 Australian, really, to get it up and running. And in most cases that will work. And there's also a question about platforms. The 2 major platforms that Composer runs on are IBM I and also Windows servers. So in honouring our pledge to stick to the schedule so we don't run over time, because we know everyone is busy today, we'll be ending the webinar now, and as I said, we'll be following up with each one of you via email with a link to this webinar that you can share with colleagues and other information. Thank you so much for your attention.